All right, let's open our Bibles tonight. If you have the sheet, that is really just simply what we discussed last week is point number 1. And you'll notice there's a lot of points under point number 1. I actually kind of gave you a little bit of a heads up and gave you part of point number 2. I'm hoping to cover more than just one point of these things per week. And our goal, as we said, is to kind of get some financial stability in our mind at least. And then when all of this kind of comes to the point, we're going to try to encourage you to get involved and let's together try to pay off our mortgage note completely, totally. How many of you would love to be able to just take the note and watch it burn right here and be completely debt free? That'd be a great joy. But I understand this. It doesn't really help for you to pay a building off when you're struggling at home. Okay? If the principles of the Lord work, they ought to work at home as well as in a church setting. And so I'm not just going to pump you up and become the cheerleader and say, let's pay off our building debt without trying to encourage you that these same principles will work in your home as well. I have counseled, I don't know how many couples I've married over the years, but I have always given a session on finances, probably not nearly long enough, but 75% of all marriages that end in divorce cite as one of the contributing factors financial problems. That's 3 out of 4. 3 out of 4 have trouble finding out. It doesn't mean they're all bankrupt. It just means that they're either digging the hole bigger and bigger as time goes on, or they just don't have the ability to get ahead as they thought they would. And so I want to cover these things for you. You say, well, I don't think that's something that your church should be involved with, and yet the book you've got in your lap says as much about money as it does any other topic. And so I'm not advocating some get-rich-quick scheme. I'm not, I'm not a faith healer. I'm not a charismatic in the sense that name it, claim it. There is a balance in Scripture. But the reason they go to all those things and put together all those teaching thoughts is because there's a lot in your Bible about money. And last week we looked at the first principle, and if you don't have that principle down yet, you need to go back and get that principle. And the first principle that I need when it comes to finances is nothing belongs to me. It all belongs to God. Boy, see, we're not real happy about that. I notice the crowd's down a little bit. It'll probably dwindle a little bit every week because when you start talking about money, nobody wants it. When they're out of money, they all show up with their hand out. Amen. Boy, the church gets a bad rap for not helping people out that are struggling, who, when they're not struggling, do nothing for the Lord. Now, I'm not saying that about you because we have a very good record here, as far as I know, with folks that give. And I think that's one of the basic things you need to learn as a Christian is how to trust the Lord. I mean, if you can trust the Lord with your soul, which is eternal, and can't trust Him with a piece of paper that isn't worth the paper it's printed on, you've got some real problems. Okay? Now, how many of you know the money in your pocket isn't worth anything, technically? Okay? All this thing is just it's a note of barter. Okay? That's a promissory note. Did you ever look at that? It's a promissory note. It has no value at all. You see, years ago, people used to barter and trade, and if somebody needed a shovel, they found somebody that had a hoe, and they traded the hoe for the shovel, and that's the way they, that's the way they worked it. If they needed some pears and the guy had some tomatoes, they would swap. They bartered with each other in order to have enough. And then when it got up into gold and silver, if somebody needed something, they would give you some gold or some silver. And, they didn't just take the gold and silver down and throw it in the bank. They made trinkets out of it. You get a bad rap, somebody talked about they bought Long Island for, was it $24 worth of beads and trinkets from the Indians, and somebody says, that's the white man pillaging and raping the culture of the Indians. You know why they did that? Because they wanted the beads. Okay? They didn't walk away going, oh, we got ripped off. Oh, no, they were excited about getting beat. You say, why? Because they didn't have any. Those things were brand new to them. And so those things change, and they have an ebb and a flow as you come through time. What commands a great amount of money right now may not command any money at all in a few years. Somebody said, I bought a house and my house has increased in value. Your house has increased in value, but it's not worth anymore. Okay? I want you to understand that concept. You say, well, I paid $50,000. My house worth $70,000 now. No, it would take $70,000 to buy your house now. That's not a statement of how much your house has increased in value, but a statement of how much this has decreased in value. Is it making sense? Understanding money is imperative if you're going to get by and accomplish something for the Lord. Now, I want to cover point number 2 tonight. And I would hope that you will memorize at least the verse we gave you last week about divine ownership. I've made a statement over the years. So I've had some times when people get mad at me. I really would like to see the interest rate go to about 75%. Would thrill me and tickle me to death. And you say, why? Because if you get on one side of the interest coin, you're paying interest. Nobody wants to pay higher interest. Anybody wants to pay higher interest? The other side of the coin, though, is you have invested your money and you're being paid interest. Okay? If you have a savings account tonight, you can amen what I'm going to say. You'd like to see the interest rate go to about triple digits. Now, if it goes to triple digits, though, that doesn't mean things are worth anymore. It's that, this building is still made out of steel and junk. And the steel and junk is there. What happens is it would take more to rebuild this building. The value will increase because the money decreases. Right now, we're concerned about runaway inflation. All right, and I'll tell you why we're worried about runaway inflation in our government is because the government has been propping up the economy for the last 8 or 9 years. They've been pumping billions and billions. This president promised he was going to reduce the deficit. He's actually increased it more than it's ever been increased in the history. Matter of fact, all the other presidents before him have not increased the deficit as much as this president has increased it, all of them combined. So it comes down to political talk. You say, well, why is he doing that? Because he's afraid of what the alternative would be, and that would be the total economic collapse. Okay, how much would it cost to buy your house if tomorrow the government announced, here's a 20. If a government announced that a $20 bill actually was no longer worth $20, it was only worth 15 cents. See what I'm talking about? That's called runaway inflation. And now how it occurs is when your government continues to print money and 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 print money. So whereas years ago, there are only 5 of these. And because there's only 5, they're worth a whole lot more because, man, a lot of people want these. But now there are 5 billion of these. How many of you remember when you used to pick up pennies when you found them in the parking lot? Most people, I read an article long ago, most people don't even pick up dimes anymore. It's not worth the bending over. That's what they said. So just a basic understanding of money is just a tool of barter, a tool of trade in order to gain things that I need and supply somebody else with things that they need. And it ebbs and flows. It comes and raises, it lowers, and all of that is a part of supply and demand. People talk about, well, democracy has ruined the economy. Well, communism, when it comes to operating with finances, operates on democratic principles. You give me the money, I give you, that's all democracy. That's the way it is. So democracy, when you're in a communist situation, only works for the elite. Okay, they never get rid of democracy. The guys over there in the Russian KGB and the black market and all that, they still very good capitalists. The only people that are communists are the people living in the communes who don't have any money. And so they do what they're told. When we begin to deal with this thing, God has some principles about how to handle it, how to deal with it, and how not to be mastered by money. Far too many people in our country today are mastered and controlled by money. And principle number 1 last week is it all belongs to God. It doesn't belong to me. That's not just the money. That's my house. That's my car. That's the land. That's my family. That's my kids. That's my clothes in the closet. It all belongs to the Lord. Every once in a while, we get kids running around here on a random sundry time. A couple weeks ago, somebody was down pounding on the piano, and I heard it. And I opened the door, and I told somebody, I said, go down there and tell somebody to stop pounding on that piano before they destroy it. They gave me a look, you know. That's like, is it yours? No, it's not mine. It's the Lord's. It's the Lord. Leroy Wright used to tell his people, God didn't send me to run the church. He sent me here to keep you from running it. Okay? And sometimes that's the way it works as a pastor. That's the job that you have. And so when we talk about prosperity, when we talk about getting ahead, it's not always finances, and the finances all belong to the Lord. Your first step would be to get on your knees before the Lord and say, Lord, everything that I have belongs to you. It's all yours, if you meant it. Okay? And you say, why? Because that's the way things work. If God taps you on the shoulder and says, I want this, then okay, it's yours. Jephthah becomes the epitome of that when he said, Lord, if you'll deliver me from my enemies, I'll give you the first thing that comes through the door of my house. And when he got back, his daughter was the first thing that walked through the door. God doesn't advocate sacrificing human beings. It wasn't God's idea. It was Jephthah's idea. And Jephthah was a man of honor and a man of his word. You say, well, what is that trying to teach me? Be careful what you promise God, because it all belongs to him. It's more important that I fulfill my obligations in the relationship that I have with God than anything else in life. My life is a waste if I accomplish anything that is to a greater extent than I walk with the Lord. And having said that, probably half of every independent, fundamental, Bible-believing church you'd go into in this country, about half the membership of that church have no clue of what it really means to live life. Most people look at coming to church as a recess or coming to an oasis. You know, I need a drink of cool water. I need a breath of fresh air. I need to just come and relax a little bit. Listen, then you've got priorities all messed up. David said, I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. It'd be better for me just to open the door for people and just stay at church all the time. We don't get that idea because there's here and then there's there. And while we like it here, we also like it there. And we like coming to church, we like getting the preaching. We don't like the hard preaching because the hard preaching usually deals with there. And we don't like somebody to tell us how to handle there because we really, push comes to shove, like there just a little better than we do here until the disaster comes. And when the disaster comes out there, we run here. Now, that's why our lives are all like scrambled eggs. We just stir it all up in the life that we live. It's all God's. If you would come to that point in your life where you say, Lord, everything I have, everything that I possess, everything that I will possess in my life, it belongs to you. And if something that belongs to you is in my possession and you have need of it, all you have to do is ask. That's something you need to do now. You say, why? Because most of us wait until he asks and then we take an inventory. Well, I only have one of those. I got 3 of these. I give you one of those. But, you see, but that's claiming our own personal ownership. It all belongs to the Lord. Here's point number 2. And again, these are not new. These, if you study Dave Ramsey or some of these guys that are there, Larry Burkett's, a lot of the stuff I use is his. These are common principles because they're in the Scripture. The reason they sound so new has nothing to do with the principles. It has to do with us and the way Christianity has developed over the last 40 years. And we have developed away from biblical principles and to our detriment. Point number 2 tonight. I want you to look at Proverbs chapter 10, verse 22. And I'm going to talk about this second principle. You can jot them down. We may get into point 3 tonight. Would be good if we could. And we'll do our best to get along the way. There are about 12 of these points. And once we get there, then we can start talking about implementing some sound financial principles as husbands, wives, families, and that type of an environment. Proverbs 10:22 says, the blessing of the Lord. Now, what is the blessing of the Lord? I don't know exactly what it is. It could be different things to different people. But it is the blessing of the Lord. What does that imply? It implies that God is going to do what? He's going to give me something that I what? Really want, I really need, would really be great to see, would make me happy, any of the above. The blessing of the Lord is something that I desire. And in the passage here, it says, the blessing of the Lord, it maketh rich. I want you to underline those 3 words. It maketh rich. What makes rich? The blessing of the Lord. You see, if I have the Lord who supplies my every need, then what do I need? If I have the Lord, I don't need anything. How many of you'd like to live in a situation where, honestly, you didn't have anything that you needed? Do you know what people are scrambling for with their finances? To get rid of their need. Guaranteed, no matter what you're spending your money on a monthly basis, whenever the bills come in and you write the checks or you spend the card or whatever it is you do, you are paying for something that at one time you thought you needed in order to be happy. Now people say, well, you know, the gas bill and the light bill, you gotta have that. Don't give me that, you gotta. You don't gotta have it. Turn the lights off. Well, I don't want to. Well, exactly. Now we're back. I want it. I want the conveniences. And they're, well, yeah, but you know, everybody has, you know, over 2/3 of the world doesn't have running water and electric lights. But with us, well, I have to have it. And by the way, it's, as a rule, it's not your light bill and it's not those things that get you in financial trouble. Okay, the reason you can't pay your light bill is because you got in financial trouble with all the junk. Amen. All right, let's go. The blessing of the Lord. That's your memory verse. The blessing of the Lord, it maketh rich. Watch this now. And he addeth no sorrow with it. Did you ever notice there's a catch to everything this world's got? It doesn't matter what it is that you obtain, you will be disappointed in it pretty quickly. You go out tonight, whatever it is, if you like electronics, if you like jewelry, if you like clothes, whatever, you go out tonight and you buy the best of whatever it is that is available to be purchased, and in 6 months it'll be old and out of style and you'll want something else. Do you realize if you're following that process, thinking you're getting rich, you're not getting rich at all. You're getting on the hamster wheel. And you just go round and round and round and round and round and round. The blessing of the Lord is the thing that liberates. It is the thing that maketh rich. And not only does it make rich, because if I went to the mall and somebody gave me $5,000 to spend at the mall, well, I wouldn't go to the mall. I'd spend $5,000 to stay out of the mall. I'd go to Cabela's. Bass Pro, you know, something like that, somewhere worthwhile. But if somebody gave me $5,000 and said, here you go, I could spend it. There's no doubt in my mind I could spend it. I could find things that I need that I didn't even know I needed because I didn't know they existed. Did you ever find something you didn't know existed, and as soon as you found out it existed, you said, I really need that? You were oblivious till you found out it existed. I could spend that money, but I'll guarantee you this, inside of 3, 4, 5, 6 months, I'd be disappointed with most of the stuff I'd bought. That's what I'm saying. We get caught up in this thing of finance, money. That's what's going to make me. It doesn't. It doesn't work. And some of you may not recognize that till you get up into your 60s and into your 70s. And then all once you look around, you think, what do I spend all this money on? Because I'm just as unfulfilled as I was at 22 when I was looking for all the doors to open. Here I am, all the doors are closed, and I still don't have any more than I had when I was there. You see, the problem was you had some wrong values. You assumed that what came in life was the things that made you rich, and they don't. The blessing of the Lord, it maketh rich, and he addeth no sorrow with it. You can buy a new car, and before you pay the third payment, you'll be going, I wish I'd have waited and got a different one. I wish I got one with this bell or this whistle. I wish I'd got one this color. I wish. You can always go back and second. That's human nature. You realize that's not the problem with the product. That's the problem with us. We're trying to fill a black hole. That's what we are. We just keep sucking it in and it disappears. And when you start trying to fill in a black hole, you're going to spend a lot of money and a lot of time and accomplish absolutely nothing. And so if you can break that hold and realize, you know what? It's not about money. Everything belongs to God. I am a steward of what belongs to God. What did Adam and Eve own? Nothing. Yet they lived in the best place on the face of the earth. Their workload was phenomenal. It all belonged to God. You realize if we could come to that place in our life where we recognized everything, every breath I breathe belongs to God. Now, I'm not saying go build you a mud hut and eat ants. Okay? You know what the Lord said to Adam and Eve? Listen, I planted this garden. You can eat everything you want except for one thing. Now, here's what will tell where your financial philosophy is. Well, yeah, this is the one thing they really wanted. You realize how many millions of plants and varieties and fruits and vegetables and flavors and tastes there had to be in that garden? Not tainted by sin. Can you imagine what must have been? You talk about sweetness. You talk about filling. You talk about good food. It was all there. And how much did they own? None of it. God said, help yourself to whatever you want. Just don't touch that one. Well, yeah, but listen, it all belonged to him. You know why Adam and Eve sinned? Because they got thinking, well, wait a minute, that tree right there belongs to us. This is our garden. The Lord let us have it. It's our garden. I can eat that tree and I can eat that tree. Why can't I eat that tree? Listen, you can't eat anything if he doesn't allow it because it all belongs to him. That's where we get mixed up. As soon as we claim ownership, then the devil's in there because he'll want you to own the very thing God doesn't want you to have. And he'll get you wrapped up and tied up in that. Here's the thought tonight. True wealth is not limited to treasure. True wealth is God's good gift. True wealth is God's good gift. And it's not limited to wealth. How much money did Adam and Eve have? None. They have a dime. You'd have looked at them and said, they didn't even have a bank account. No CDs, no IRAs. Poor people. Poor. Ain't even got clothes. Poor people. There was not a wealthier person in all of the universe than those two people. But see, it doesn't fit our financial philosophy. The blessing of the Lord, it maketh rich. Psalm 113, verse 7, 8, and 9 say this. He raiseth up the poor out of the dust and lifteth the needy out of the dunghill, that he may set him with princes, even with the princes of his people. He maketh the barren woman to keep house and to be a joyful mother of children. Praise ye the Lord. Every good thing that happens in that passage is a result of the Lord. It didn't say they tried a little harder, they worked a little harder. No, the Lord just provided what they could never have accomplished. That's how it works. You see, if I have the Lord and He owns everything, I don't need anything. If you can think back to when you were a child, which is a long way for some of you. Some of us just never grew up, so it's not real hard to think about it. How many times did you ask your mom and dad for something? How many times did you stop asking your mom and dad for it? You just thought they were a bottomless pit of money, just was always there. They probably let you know. Every time you went into the store. I talked about my grandson Caden. He says, nobody ever buys me any dinosaurs. He collects dinosaurs. Nobody's ever bought him anything but dinosaurs. He has a room full of dinosaurs. He carries them with him wherever he goes. He has a dinosaur now that is hollow inside, and it holds his dinosaurs. Nobody ever buys me any dinosaurs. You know what that means? That means that there's no satisfaction in achieving the things that I want because I can't have it all. And so I'll never be satisfied, but I can have the one who owns it all. And if I put my priority there and my focus there, then I don't need the junk. He owns it. And He'll say, listen, you can eat of all the trees, but don't eat that one. He'll restrict only the things that will hurt me. Sound like your parents, doesn't it? You know, the old story about mom and the apple pie, and she was always the one that waited until the end, but she wanted to make sure that everybody got the piece of apple pie, and mom never got the pie. All of those, they make us teary-eyed, and isn't it wonderful to have a mother like that? You have a God like that. How would you have felt if mom came by and she had the pie and she had just cut it and you said, I'm going to have it all? Because that's what we do with the wealth of this world. I want everything. Instead of saying, Lord, it belongs to you. Psalm 37 verse 22 says, for such as be blessed of Him shall inherit the earth, and they that be cursed of Him shall be cut off. Such as be the blessing of the Lord, it maketh rich. Such as be blessed of Him, they shall inherit the earth. I don't own anything. It all belongs to the Lord. I just want you to know, everything on this planet belongs to me because it belongs to the Lord, and I have Him. There's no such thing as a Christian copying a pity party about what he doesn't have when he understands his relationship with the Lord. If you ever get poochy-lipped about, well, everybody else has that, but I don't have that. Somehow, you've got your relationship with the Lord twisted. You say, well, yeah, He gave it to them, though, and He didn't give it to me. He doesn't give it to anybody. It belongs to Him. He's just allowing them to use it. Did you ever get in a fight with a sibling about a toy? Well, I want to play with a toy. I want to play. And what does your mother tell you? Wait till they're finished, and then you can play with it. Well, yeah, but it belongs to the Lord. Just let Him handle His own affairs, and you'll get your chance to play in the sandbox. But I want it now. Sound familiar? He got it, and it's not fair. You know why we think it's not fair? Because we think we own it. The wealth that God gives us is His gift. Things that He lets us utilize and brings into our life and can just as easily take them away. We don't need them to have them all the time. I've said before, listen, you want to buy a boat? Don't waste your time. Get a friend who has one. Amen. You know, I used to fly airplanes. I didn't have an airplane, but I had a friend that had one. Good way to go. I had the keys. I knew where it was tied down. I could just go anytime and unlock the door and get in it and crank the engine and go. You say, do you know what? When maintenance time came, I didn't have to worry about anything. The Lord owns it all. Let Him own it. Let Him own it. Such as be blessed of Him shall inherit the earth, and they that be cursed of Him shall be cut off. You ever feel like you're cut off? When you're cut off, there's no more coming in or not enough coming in. Sometimes we look around and say, well, God's not being fair. No, He's cut you off. Why? Well, because you've been too extravagant with His stuff. Genesis 26, verse 12, 13 and 14 talks about Isaac as he came into the land. Just a young man, just starting out. The scripture said Isaac sowed in that land after he runs in with Abimelech here, and they argue a little bit about whose wells these are. Isaac sowed in the land and received in the same year an 100-fold. That's 100% interest. Anybody like to get 100% interest on your savings account? Don't think anybody would disagree with that. 100% increase here, 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. Now, which is worth more? The 100-fold increase or the Lord's blessing? Which one would you take? You see, the blessings ensure, because of where they come from, the Lord, that there is an unending supply. I might get a 100% increase on my crop that I've sowed this year, but there may be a drought next year. There may be a famine next year. The seed may not be good next year. You see why it's imperative for me to make sure I have the Lord blessed him. Verse 13 says, and the man waxed great and went forward and grew until he became very great. For he had possessions of flocks and possessions of herds and a great store of servants, and the Philistines envied him. Where did he get it from? The Lord. Well, I worked hard for everything I have. You don't have anything. You don't have anything. It all belongs to the Lord. And if you've got more than somebody else, it's because the Lord blessed you. And if somebody envies you, that's what everybody wants. We wouldn't say that, but we all want the Lord to bless me enough so that somebody envies me. You say, oh, I don't feel that way. You do too. You flaunt it when you get something new. It's nice to have the blessings of the Lord. The blessings of the Lord are the things that make us truly wealthy. Did you ever think about this? What we place as far as prosperity always has to do with money. And I read to you last week just a few names. There are hundreds of names. I took some that are supposedly well known, and some of them made millions, and one guy made billions of dollars and then lost it all. During the stock market crash, there were gentlemen that climbed out of their offices and jumped off of the ledges, committed suicide. 20 minutes before, they were wealthy. 20 minutes later, they committed suicide because they had nothing. Let me ask you a question. What did they really have? They didn't really have anything at all. It was a perception. They thought they had it, and they never did. Because the blessings of the Lord are where real riches are found. we put all of our focus on things and bank accounts and finances. And I believe in principles and financial principles, and we're going to look at investing, and all of that's important. But, you know, somebody said, well, you know, I got an investment that's paying 4 or 5%. It doesn't mean a thing in the world. You say, why? It would take one stroke of a presidential pen to take away everything you possess in any bank or institution in this country. So people would revolt, and they'd turn the machine guns and flamethrowers on you. You got no power. Do you realize that? You say, well, I got some guns. I'm happy for you. That's really nice. My brother was a crewman on an AC-135 gunship. It's one of the ancients of the fleet, but it just happens to be the most heavily armed aircraft in the world. It can fly up there at about 1,200, 1,300, 1,400 feet, low level, but high enough so that you couldn't hit it with your high-powered rifle. And it can pump out 17,000 rounds of ammunition in a minute. It can put a bullet every square inch of a football field in less than a minute. It has 105 millimeter howitzers. It has 40 millimeter Mikes, 20 millimeter cannons. It has 7.62 miniguns on it, all of the above. And they can all be brought online at one time. They say it this way: you can run, but you can't hide. Okay? What are you going to do? We've got all this, you know, it's American spirit. No, no, no. It's the Lord, okay? It's either the Lord or you're dead meat. It's either God that's going to take care of you or you're going to die somewhere tired. It's time we switched our priorities from the things of this world to the things of the Lord. Because the things of the world you can collect and you can amass and you can fill rooms and you can gather things together, and it doesn't work when you pull the trigger. Or you can do it God's way, and two guys can go into the city, the stronghold of their enemy, and an old woman will take them and deliver them out, and they win the victory. Doing what? Blowing ram's horns and shouting. Who would have thought? You can't even buy that in the store. True wealth is God's gift. Do you ever think about this? What if tonight I could guarantee you $8.5 million in exchange for your health? Any takers? So why all the fuss about the money? The old folks used to say it this way: if you've got your health, you've got everything. I remember my wife's dad in his 90s, that's what he'd say: you got your health, you got everything. I thought, well, yeah, you say that because you got some money. But he was right. You know how many people there are in this world right now that would give everything they owned just to have a day without pain? You say, yeah, but I'm strong and I'm healthy. You are now till you hit that car on the way home from church. And then you'll hurt every day for the rest of your life. When's the last time you thanked God that you felt well in the morning? When's the last time you thanked Him? I mean, when's you complained about not having enough money to pay this or pay that, or you went in the store and you said, I really want one of those, and boy, if the Lord would just give me some money. And when's the last time you just thanked God that you weren't like that poor fellow that just walked by? The blessing of the Lord, it maketh rich, and He addeth no sorrow with it. Think of how many people spent their whole lives working and laboring in an intensive manner to achieve something that brought them financial prosperity, only to find out they'd burned their body out physically. These rock and roll stars, boy, they climb the top. You know 90% of them can't hear? What a thought. You made music all your life and now you can't even hear a bird sing in the morning. These dopers and potheads that party. Now they're in their 50s and they look like they're in their 90s. And somebody has to come in and get them dressed every morning because they can't remember where they put their clothes. And they're worth $16 million. You want to trade with them? Aren't you glad you can think? What are you trying to tell me tonight? I'm trying to tell you true wealth is God's gift. And it's not limited to just money or treasure. Do you think about how many people in this world have great sums of money who live in a Sharia state? All the wealth. You know how much wealth is in the Middle East? Those sheiks and those shahs and those guys over there with, I mean, they've got enough money to power the world for 6 days. Just their assets. And yet, if they say the wrong thing or look the wrong way, somebody cut their head off. They're afraid of going into church because somebody will blow it up. I mean, if you tonight could get $8 or $10 million, you just had to live in a cave in Afghanistan. What do you think? The Taliban would come by and check up on you every 2 or 3 days. Rather have your freedom? There are a lot of things worth a whole lot more than money. I preached on joy Sunday. The ability to laugh. To tell jokes and funny things. Now everything's just filth on television. Comedians are not funny anymore, they're just dirty. There's not a whole lot of real joy in this world anymore. There are far more tears going to be shed tonight than there's going to be the sound of laughter in the world you live in. And the vast majority of all those tears are going to be shed in the homes of people that have things that you and I would envy and wish that we had, thinking somehow that's what would make us rich. The blessing of the Lord, it maketh rich. Comfort. Comfort. Well, I just want to be comfortable. Comfortable is an arbitrary term that is never solid. It's like shifting sand. Because as soon as you spend the money and get what you know is going to make you comfortable, it won't make you comfortable anymore. There'll be something else that'll make you more comfortable. Comfort is the guy that may only have one chair. But when he sits down in that one chair, he doesn't need anything else. He's comfort. When somebody dies and you got bad news and somebody didn't make it and the heart attack claimed them in an instant and they knock on the door to tell you that the one you're waiting to come home is never going to come home again. How much money you suppose would take to have you not long for some comfort? Well, what are you saying? Everything I mentioned comes from the Lord. All of those things are provided by the Lord. And they're things our money cannot touch. You can't even begin to put a price. If you were to walk into a funeral home anywhere in town here and find a grieving widow or a saddened parent as they're weeping for their loss, walk up and say, listen, how much money do I need to give you to make you feel better? It'd be an insult. It would be an insult. Because if they didn't know it 3 days ago, they know it now. Money doesn't mean anything. Money doesn't provide comfort. The blessing of the Lord, it maketh rich. If I'd have taken my time there, I wouldn't have had any sorrow added to it. Just to be able to take it easy. to have some ease. That young man said, "Soul, take thine ease." And God said, "You're a fool." That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with taking your ease. The problem was he thought his ease was going to come from the possessions that he had worked and labored so hard for. You know what the statistics are of people that drop dead within 2 months of retirement? Worked all my life. I'm going to retire, I'm going to get me a boat and call it Never Again 2. Retire and walk out of the office, and 2 weeks later, drop dead with a heart attack. Just somewhere to sit down and take it easy. Ease of mind. You know how many people tonight sit down somewhere and they can't stay seated very long without something blaring in their ears or blasting in their eyes because of the guilt that they carry in their life? Some people long for silence and peace, and then some people can't stand the silence because there is no peace. Hank Williams Jr., I think, that became the star with his "I Saw the Light" song. His last trip was transported from one nightclub to the next one he was going to be in, drunk out of his mind, sleeping in the back seat, and the driver reported the last thing he heard Hank Williams say before he drifted off into sleep that he died in, drowned in his own vomit or whatever it was "There ain't no peace, blankety blanket, there ain't no peace." Top of the hill. You say, "Well, yeah, but listen, don't give me that. Those are the people you and I envy." The Bible said here the Philistines envied Isaac. You know why? Because the blessing of the Lord, it maketh rich. Isaac had something they didn't have. They had the gold, they had the silver, they had the gods, the temples, they had all the possessions, but they didn't have what they wanted most, because only that can come from God. Friends. Friends. How much does it cost to buy friends? How many people that I think about, what's the gal, Lindsay Lohan? What a train wreck. What a train wreck. Do you realize if they ever do announce she's getting married, can I tell you why she's getting married? Because somebody found out she had some money. Ain't nobody would marry a piece of garbage like that if they have any self-respect at all. You say you shouldn't call her a piece of garbage. I'm speaking reverently. You say, well, that's unkind. She's the one that painted the picture. You know what she's got? She's got money. Nothing else. No peace of mind, no joy, no friends. You say, oh, she's always got a crowd around her. That's because she's got money, and they want the money. She's got no friends. What a trip. Laughter. When's the last time you heard people laughing over something that was just clean and funny? Just humor. You know what the world would pay for something like that? You can lose your innocence in this world, chasing after the junk. And when you lose your innocence in this world, you don't ever get it back. And there are people that are in their 70s and in their 80s, they'd get every dime they owned to get back their innocence so they could just laugh at something. This is a sad sermon, preacher. Oh, no, it's not. It's really a joyous sermon. It all depends on where your perspective is. Excitement. Just to have some excitement in life. We run from one thing to the other. I heard David Gibbs III several years ago give one of the best, it wasn't even a sermon, he just talked economics. If I'm not mistaken, I think he graduated from Duke University. He was #1 in the law class, which he graduated from. The #2 guy was lead counsel for the White House. He was Terry Schiavo's attorney. And he explained how finances had changed in the marketplace. Tremendous. He said for years in America, the idea was to build the best product you can build and sell it for a fair price. That was the controlling mantra of the finance business. He said that changed in about 1958. The colleges changed, the finance courses all changed, and now here's the mantra. The mantra is find out what the customer wants and make it, and then charge them as much as they'll pay for it. That's been the controlling mantra of the finance world since then. That's the world that brought you Wall Street and the financial disasters. Just something to be excited about. People are depressed in this world. They've gone after finances, they've gone after money, they've got credit cards, they've got 10 or 15 credit cards, they're paying off one credit card with another credit card, and they've got a house full of junk, and all of it's new junk, but it didn't satisfy. I'd give anything in the world just to have something that's exciting. A sense of accomplishment. If you knew right now that you were going to die in 5 minutes, that's all you got, 5 minutes. Your heart's going to quit beating. We're going to haul you out to the morgue. Tell me, in 15 or 20 words or less, what's the accomplishment of your life? What is there that defines your life? What makes you different? What makes somebody want to be like you? Be that guy that wrote down, my life was given to serve as the very best example of what not to do with your life. What is your life about? Well, you know, no, you don't have tomorrow. Right now, it's over. You see, we've always got this idea that life's going to happen out there. That's how we tolerate the morbidity of chasing after the dollar and trying to amass all the junk. Yeah, but you know, one more thing, and one of these days, you're going to hear mine. No, we're not. We're not going to hear your name. Nobody's going to know you. You'll die, and 2 weeks later, most people have forgotten all about you. The ones that remember you will remember you for something you've accomplished in your life. If you're going to die in 5 minutes from now, what is it you've accomplished? Depressing sermon, huh? Do you understand everything I've talked about tonight has come about as people try to grab hold of riches and money and bank accounts and wealth and all of the credit and all of the junk? My mother had a 6th grade education. She was born in a family with 6 brothers and 3 sisters. Her father was a sharecropper. He never owned a piece of land in his life. He raised crops for somebody else. None of the kids got a chance to go to school. They worked hard. She told me one time, I said, Mom, did you ever have any dogs? She said, did you ever have a dog? She said, oh man, she said, we had 5 or 6 dogs. I said, really? Because I wanted a dog. You had 5 or 6 dogs? She said, yeah, we got them to kill the cats. I said, well, why did you have cats? She said, we had cats to kill the mice. She grew up in a place where everything served a purpose or it didn't exist. And yet, I've heard her sit for just hours and talk about the stories and laugh and talk and tear up. I remember my grandparents probably didn't have 2 nickels to rub, but we could sit around for 4 or 5 hours and listen to them talk about the old days. And every time I ever heard them talk about the old days, I found myself as a little fella not longing to move forward, but to go backward. I grew up wishing I could grow up in the same type of an environment my grandparents grew up in. Because what I heard in their laughter and in their talk and what I saw in their eyes when they described their childhood was not what I saw. Nor have I seen it since those days. Those are gone and forgotten days. What changed? We got a lot of money. We sold our health for the money. We sold our peace for the temporary satisfaction. We sold our freedom. We sold our joy. We sold our comfort. We sold our ease. We sold our friends. We sold our laughter, our excitement, and our sense of accomplishment. And we don't have much left now. We just got a lot of junk. And we're still paying payments on it. You say, man, that's too morbid for... I hope it is, because I want you to shift your priorities. Take all of that and just contrast it with this. Somebody somewhere today led a soul to Jesus Christ. Somewhere in the world tonight, there's a fellow sitting and everything's changed. He's thinking about this morning when he woke up, how unhappy he was, how depressed he was. And now it's all changed. And he's thanking a God he didn't even necessarily believe in this morning for some Christian that came, and when he asked them for $1, they gave him Jesus. If that fella dies, that Christian that witnessed to them dies tonight, you know who's going to be there to appreciate him? That old wretched sinner. He would show up at the funeral. And his testimony would be something like this: I wanted money. I wanted a handout. What I got was everything. And the sad thing is, that's an indictment of most Christians. Because we've got everything, and we're looking for the handout. Financial principles. Number one, it all belongs to God. Nothing here belongs to you. You can have as much as you can carry out with you, a fellow said one time. I love the story about the fellow in England who had worried about what would happen with his heirs if they took all of his money. He was angry at his wife, and so when he died, he told his executor, I want you to take everything that I have in the bank and in assets, and I want you to liquidate it, put it all in cash, and I want you to put it all in the casket around me. So when they file by, they'll see me, and I'm taking it with me. And so they had to get an oversized casket, and they piled the blocks of money all around him. When it was all said and done, his grieving widow came, knowing that he had taken all the money. And she stood and wept for just a minute and then wiped a tear from her eyes. Picked up her purse, got out her checkbook, wrote a check for $1 million, put it in his shirt pocket, and took all the cash out. She said, you can take it with you, sweetheart. There's no joy in that. The joy at the end of the day is to be able to say, you know what, I had enough to pay my bills today. I had enough to buy a meal so we could eat. But I didn't lose my laughter. I didn't lose my joy. Didn't lose my self-accomplishment. I've watched some of you guys work overtime, hours and hours and hours. For what? Stuff. Stuff. Now, I have no problem with having a work ethic, but I believe the Lord didn't create us as slaves and zombies to fuel his machine in the galaxy. He created us to enjoy all things freely and richly. And I believe you ought to work. But I believe the reason we have to work all the extra stuff is because we've got a shifted priority that says, I want more. I want more. Somebody told me one time, well, preacher, I want to have some to leave behind. Hey, let me help you. Go drain your bank account today. Give it to us. We'll invest it. And then you won't have to work so hard. Get your financial priorities right. Point number one, it all belongs to God anyway. When you take your last breath, you're not even going to be able to hold that. It's mine. Oh, no, it's not. You're going to go out into eternity empty-handed because nothing belongs to you. But if it belongs to the Lord, you have no needs while you're here. How many of those promises in the New Testament as well as the Old Testament have to do with one abiding principle, and that abiding principle is this: when you need something, I'm here. That's what God says. When you need something, I'm here. When you got to have it, I got it. When you need it in a moment, I can handle that. There has nothing ever occurred in your life that needed a response that God couldn't provide. And yet, we just want more. You know what got mankind in trouble? I would assume that God's garden in Eden probably encompassed, I would guess, 100,000 square miles. You say, why would you believe that? Because we got big gardens in the world. I can't imagine God would let somebody outdo him. I got to believe there were trees of every variety, fruits of every flavor, vegetables that tasted good, probably good tasting Brussels sprouts. That's a stretch, but God put it there and he said to two people, you know what? I planted this. It's growing well. Guys, just help yourself. Anything you want, help yourself. You can eat all the fruit off the tree if you want because it'll grow back in the morning. That's the way I created things. Just don't mess with this tree over here. Why, God? Because, well, I'll tell you why. Because that'll make you unhappy. That's the only reason. And he said, help yourself. I walked up on the front porch of a man by the name of Fitzhugh years ago. He had been my dad's industrial arts teacher when he was in high school. And my dad was an old man then, and I was not a young man. And he had about 7 or 8 ponds on his land. Little old 2-track roads, and you'd go back down through there, and there'd be cows in the road, and you'd have to swat them to get them out of the road, and you'd get on one of those ponds and go back in there with that Spanish moss hanging out of those trees about the time the sun came up, and cypress knots sticking up out of the ground. We'd get in an old wooden rowboat. We'd row out there just as quiet as it could be. My dad taught me to fish. My dad could throw a lure through that door over there from right here and never hit the side of the door one time in 20. He'd over the piano. We'd be back in there and fish. And we stopped one day at Mr. Fitzhugh's place, and Dad said we ought to stop and thank him. He doesn't let everybody in here to fish. We went and talked. He had on a pair of bibbed overalls, and if he had on anything else, I didn't know anything about it. Sitting in a chair with a glass of iced tea. We talked to him for about 20 minutes, and I'm a young guy, and I said, Mr. Fitzhugh, I said, how much land do you own? And he said, I don't know. I said, I have no idea. He said, we replaced a fence a couple of years ago. It took 35 miles across the back. 35 miles of fence. I said, Mr. Fitzhugh, I said, you could sell this and get millions of dollars. I'll never forget it. He looked at me. He never batted an eye. He said, son, people got money buying land. some wisdom I never grasped in all my life. You see, we're looking at how much money there is in it. Those guys are saying, people who got the money want to buy what we've got. You know something, Christian? There are people in this world that have got 10 times more money than you could amass if you started right now and saved $1 million a day. But you know what they're spending their money on? Things that you and I already have. The peace, the joy, the accomplishment, all of those things. You know how we got them? The blessing of the Lord. It maketh rich. Principle number 2 is that real wealth is a gift from God. And it doesn't have a lot to do with money. 2 principles we've talked about. If you'll not just listen to the preaching, but meditate and grasp those principles, there's a possible of being set free. And I'm not talking, as I said, about living in a mud hut. I'm talking about God blessing. And when you get something new, you know it came from God. And you thank Him for it. And when something breaks or tears up or falls apart or you lose it, you can thank God because it didn't belong to you. You're just like a kid with a father, a doting father. Doesn't matter whether you've got it or not because Dad's got it. He'll take care of us. That's where real liberty is in life. And some of us are a long, long, long way from where we need to be.